Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Astro Consciousness YouTube channel. I'm Millie, and I am here to give you your forecast for the solar eclipse in Aries taking place on April 8th. Okay, so before I move into breaking down all of the important bits and pieces of this eclipse, I want to touch on a little bit of a broader perspective of this eclipse and touch on what I see happening in the collective in a very immediate and digestible way, because it absolutely matters to us as individuals. One of the things you're going to notice over the next 20 years, and I know that that's a very big time frame, but it matters. And this time frame is of Pluto in Aquarius. Pluto is going to remain in Aquarius for the next 20 years, completely transforming and shifting our collective and our relationship to it. And why it matters that we pay attention to that and what's happening collectively with this solar eclipse is because, especially over the next 5 years, we are going to see an emphasis being put on the collective community and really understanding just how much we are all connected, regardless of where we live, regardless of what we believe in, regardless of what we're told. My hope is that separation becomes less and less, and there is an understanding of we are just one piece, each of us is just one piece of a really big puzzle, okay? The reason that I bring this in at the very beginning is that Pluto plays a big role in the solar eclipse. Pluto in Aquarius has been playing an immense role in the equinox opening, the lunar eclipse in Libra, and the solar eclipse, and it will continue to be activated throughout the year with a lot of planetary ingressions and other signs, and just kind of touching on Pluto. And what that is doing is that is really redefining the fabric of the collective. Okay, why does this matter to us? In ancient astrology, solar eclipses were seen as a pretty negative and bad omen because it meant the fall of a king, the fall of an empire, the fall of someone in power. It was the fall, the eclipsing of a masculine figure. This fall of a figure, to me, as I pay attention to what's happening online, as I pay attention to what's happening, in the news, I have a different lens when I look at the news or, follow certain publications. My point is really astrological research and how the astrology is unfolding around the world. What I notice happening is people becoming very disappointed by those in power, right? Whether it's those in power politically, people becoming very disappointed and almost like really getting over this whole concept of celebrity. I notice people getting disappointed and also getting over this concept of the influencer. All of these things are changing because the call of this eclipse, of a solar eclipse in the sign of Aries, is I am eclipsing the idea of a higher power, of a masculine energy that takes the lead of my life, and I am bringing that light back into me. So when we take that power back, we stop looking outside of ourselves for someone to lead our life, to tell us what to do. And the call in its highest expression is, what within me do I need to pay attention to? What within me needs to change? Where within me do I need to have courage? Do I need to take initiative in my life? Because there is an understanding that I am the only one for initiating certain things in my life. So let me give you a plain example. I think that the reason that a lot of these figures that we have looked up to, that we have revered, right, are falling from that pedestal that we put them in And we need to take responsibility for that instead of just lashing out in anger. I think that the fault is because the universe is leveling itself out and creating or attempting to create a different level of equilibrium where we begin to, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, to see each other as pieces of a whole puzzle rather than seeing someone above someone else. So as this solar eclipse invites us to bring that power back to the self, there is a bit of a rebirth that is happening to each of us individually. Remember, Aries is the first sign of the zodiac. There is a solar eclipse. There is a masculine energy that is eclipsing. There is something that is being eclipsed out of our lives, whether it's something very literal, and all of this depends on where the solar eclipse falls in your chart. For that, I invite you to listen to your sun, moon, ascendant horoscopes on Substack. But whatever it is, it's making room for something else to come through. Now, it's important to remember that when we tap into this new inner power, it gets to feel different and it gets to feel new. And this becomes a very important part of this opening because this solar eclipse isn't active for just a month. It's at the very least active for the next 6 months between this opening and the full moon happening in October in October 2024. But when we look at eclipses, especially a solar eclipse, which is a new moon, we are planting a seed of something, or essentially the universe is planting a seed for us. We need about a year, I would say, is a much safer timeline to really see the manifestation of the seed that is being planted now. To me, the seed that is being planted now is a calling back to the self. And the next 6 to 12 months are for us to actually get to know what it means to live a life in which we're bringing more and more power, autonomy, authority over ourselves. When you think about that collectively, and Aries being the sign of war, I'm not jumping to conclusions here. I am not a mundane astrologer. I don't study astrology of the world, but I am going by the archetypes of each energy. This can cause conflict. This can cause conflict when a collective of people is saying, wait a minute, I am seeing one thing, but I am listening to one thing, but I'm seeing another. I am bringing the authority back to me to truly understand and accept what I am seeing, regardless of what I am being told. My hope is that this brings clarity to people more and more, because the flip side of this energy is being blinded by anger. And unexpressed anger, unmanaged anger, a lack of understanding of one's anger can really blind people more to behave in very erratic ways. As a collective, we are moving into a new era, and the transition and the shift from one era to the next takes time. And that involves us being able to transition within ourselves and understand that that also takes time. So I hope that this intro has been helpful, because it's important to begin looking at how everything that is unfolding astrologically, because of Pluto in Aquarius, it really is focused, or a little bit more focused than before, on things happening and unfolding all over the world and not just to us. And I think, again, that is going to create, my hope, a greater sense of connection than not. But that will depend on each individual's level of consciousness, on what we choose to believe in. on what we choose to, on the information particularly that we choose to consume. There are many, many variables, and at the end of the day, each individual has free will. So let that land, see what comes up for you, and let's begin with the breakdown of this chart. So when we look at the chart of this eclipse, we have the sun, the moon, and Chiron all together in a triple conjunction at 19 degrees Aries. When we have this type of opening of a new moon, but this is a solar eclipse, so this is 3 new moons in one, in the first sign of the zodiac, in a fire sign. Just that alone, without the Chiron, this is an invitation, yes, to have courage, to move forward in a new direction, to initiate things, to look at where your rage and anger are in your body, how you express those, what it actually means, where it's actually deeply rooted in. It's the invitation to understand at the core that you are an autonomous being, that you are free as much as you let yourself be free within, okay? Chiron there, to me highlights the pain or the wound, because Chiron is the wounded healer of the zodiac. Chiron is the centaur, the wounded centaur that had to become wounded throughout time in order to learn from his wound and then become a healer because of that wound throughout time. In this case, here we have an opening that is about the reclaiming of the self that doesn't come without some pain. And here's what I mean by this. Very simple example. Let's say that you have been showing up in your life differently the last, I don't know, the last couple of weeks, the last couple of months. You have been showing up in your life differently. You've been showing up in your relationships differently. You have been taking initiative on certain projects and certain aspects of your life. And people, it can vary in degree as to how people are noticing. On the one hand, people simply notice and get curious and ask, hey, you're doing something different. You seem different. What's going on? And then when we get to another extreme, it's people around you very much resisting you reclaiming this part of yourself and having the audacity almost to show up in this way. So that pain right there, that wound right there, I think will vary and depend on your own level of consciousness and how you are able to receive the critique or the feedback from those around you. Because remember, especially during eclipse season, it's impossible for us to just look at Aries without looking at Libra. So anything that we do differently, because the sun represents our identity, our vitality, our ego. And there is a part of that identity, that vitality, that ego that is being eclipsed in order for something new to be born. In order for a new part of us, at least I would say it's an invitation, but this isn't an invitation. A solar eclipse, especially in the sign like Aries, is truly like a jolt from the universe saying, time to show up as yourself, time to stop hiding, time to have the courage. So to me, this doesn't feel like an invitation to have the courage to be yourself. This feels like you need to show up as yourself, and however way the universe needs to make that possible, whatever instances, whatever events, whatever altercations because of the sign of Aries that need to happen in your life in order for you to understand that, they're going to come up. And that Chiron there represents a little bit of the pain that comes with that. Now, this can feel a little bit like, am I going to fight with everyone? Am I going to, are my relationships going to end? That doesn't have to be the case. And again, it really matters where this eclipse is falling in your chart. But wherever it's falling in your chart, it's asking you to show up more as a leader in your own life in that way, as a being, as an individual being with your own thoughts, with your own expression of self and trust that the Libra, the other, the others that are meant to be in your light, in your presence, in your energy, in your sphere, are going to come simply because they are genuinely aligning with who you are now. At the time of the eclipse, we are also in the middle of a Mercury retrograde in the sign of Aries. So a solar eclipse can give us a sense of impulse, of this is what I want to start. I'm so excited about it. This is the new me. I think that that might actually happen for some people because very rarely does anything happen on the day of an eclipse for anyone. And depending on where everyone is in their own life and their own process, for some people, there are a lot of things leading up to an eclipse time. And then during eclipse time, eclipse season, things really do manifest. For others, things begin to really emerge from their own depths during eclipse season to be worked through for the following 6 months. Okay. So this very much depends on where you are. But because this is a solar eclipse in the sign of Aries, and Aries is a sign of action, it is a sign of impulse. It can be a little bit of a restless energy when it has nowhere to go. A lot of people might want to start something, move something, jump into something. With the Mercury retrograde, you are being asked to really take your time to allow whatever is coming through to digest. Because we are having a Mercury retrograde in the sign of Aries, which is obviously the sign of this eclipse. There are things within yourself, within the psyche, that you still need to face within yourself, about yourself, before you can actually believe yourself possible of this new identity that's trying to emerge, before you can actually believe yourself possible or actually believe that this identity that is emerging from within you is real or true. Now, I know that maybe for some people this sounds a little weird. That's okay. Eclipses tend to be a time that is incredibly esoteric and witchy. And so there are a lot of things that happen during eclipses that just don't make sense to the rational mind. And Mercury is the planet of the rational mind, and it's going to be retrograde. So while Mercury retrogrades during this time, there is an invitation to stop, take a look at what's actually unfolding around you, take a look at what's actually unfolding within you, and ask yourself how you feel about it. Because yes, Aries is very much the sign in the zodiac that invites us to have courage. And with a Mercury retrograde in the sign of Aries, we can really experience some fear. Because we can say, if I honor where this eclipse energy wants to take me, because I think that at an intuitive level, everyone is aware. At an intuitive level, everyone is aware of where this eclipse energy is asking them to move towards. This Mercury retrograde is about saying, that scares me a little bit. That's really big. That's really new. That is a different way of presenting myself to the world. How do I feel about stepping into a leadership role in my life, in my career, and in my relationships in some way, right? And so this Mercury retrograde is about looking at that fear. Remember, Chiron is very much involved here. To me, there is nothing easy about this new beginning. I think because eclipses eclipse something out, something needs to exit, whether it's a belief system, a person, a thing, a detaching from a place, from a career. All solar themes in the zodiac, it implies a significant shift. Again, it doesn't have to happen right away. I remember that 6 to 12 month timeline. But this Mercury retrograde in Aries is about, instead of resisting what will inevitably happen because it's an eclipse, it's about really getting honest with yourself. And Aries isn't the type of sign to surrender, but there is a calling to surrender and understand that this new beginning is happening because it needs to happen. And can you trust the path unfolding before you? Another thing with Mercury retrogrades, especially in the sign of Aries, is about really getting in touch with any anger, any resentment, and processing that. Mercury retrogrades are such great times to meet with facilitators, coaches, therapists, healers, whomever it is that you work with. Such great times. Because depending on the sign that the Mercury retrograde is happening in, that will inform you as to what type of theme you might want to touch on. But you don't have to be that strategic about this. It's going to happen very naturally. And in this case, a Mercury retrograde in Aries is about, what am I angry about? Where is this rage? What are the types of conversations that I'm having? And are the conversations that I'm having coming from that wounded, enraged place? And is that rage and that anger being misplaced on another? Again, because this is happening during eclipse season, we have to understand that people in our lives are playing a massive role in the changes that are happening to us individually. And same with us, right? There are changes happening to the people in our lives as individuals that we will be affected by. And depending on the relationships, depending on the types of conversations these people involved can have, will really determine the course of this energy unfolding in months to come. Now, the Mercury retrograde in Aries lasts between April 1st and April 25th. It comes out of its post-retrograde shadow phase on May 13th, okay? This means that there will be a desire to have conversations during this Mercury retrograde. But the likelihood of people really understanding one another is not there yet, especially not in the beginning days, the first couple of days of this Mercury retrograde, which to me feel like April 1st to April 8th, 9th. So at the time of the eclipse, it doesn't mean that there will be, like, you'll have answers, you'll have immediate clarity. Not at all, actually. But it does feel to me like people are going to feel something different within themselves. Look, as an intuitive astrologer, I rely a lot on how I feel to be present with the energies that are happening around us. And I really invite you to do the same, because as an astrologer giving you this astro forecast on YouTube, there are hundreds of more astrologers giving you probably similar or the same information. But you have to remember that you are the only one who is in your process. You have to remember that no one knows your personal information, your life, the unfolding of your life in the way that you do. Why am I saying this? Because Mercury retrograde in Aries is the call back to the self. Is how do I come back to my inner wisdom, to my inner knowledge, and honor it as the first thing that I actually listen to? Now, in order for us to trust our intuitive voice, to trust the wisdom that comes from within us, I think that takes practice. I think that takes some practice. And this Mercury retrograde is a great call for that, because this solar eclipse is an opening of a new part of ourselves, including the way that we think, communicate, and perceive ourselves. Mercury in the zodiac a lot of times is, I don't want to say it's dismissed, because we have people talk about Mercury retrogrades all the time. But I think that it has been It has been so oversimplified just by Mercury retrogrades that we forget that Mercury is the planet in the zodiac that represents self-perception, how we see ourselves, how we think. How we think, how we see ourselves is how we communicate and go about the world. It matters. And having a Mercury retrograde during such a powerful solar eclipse in the first sign of the zodiac, which represents a brand new beginning within ourselves, is about getting our minds right. And this isn't just a shift in mindset. This isn't just about going from thinking negatively to thinking positively. No, this is about the understanding that you are the authority of your thoughts, of what you speak, and therefore of what you manifest in your life. That is so important. And from there comes courage, not because you are eliminating fear, but because you understand that fear will probably play a big role throughout your life whenever you make big decisions or big shifts and big changes. But how you have a relationship with fear, what you think about fear, and most importantly, what you think about yourself in those situations, it's what's going to move you forward. So this Mercury retrograde happening during this eclipse, it's not just another Mercury retrograde. I don't think that Mercury retrogrades are ever just Mercury retrogrades. I think that at a profound interpretation of this, it's really asking us to go within and really check in with ourselves. What are you thinking? What are you saying? What are you believing? What is it that you're looking at? What are you consuming? It's a significant callback to the self on our attention. Think about how much our attention is worth nowadays. Our attention is valuable. When we look on social media, when we look anywhere, everyone is trying to grasp our attention. Our attention is valuable. And this happening during an eclipse that is about eclipsing a part of the ego that doesn't take leadership of its own life, in order for that part that does take leadership of its own life, at the same time, this is a calling that feels like an awakening. So take that into consideration as you continue to allow this eclipse energy to digest. Because it's far more than, what is this going to bring me? What does this mean for my relationship? What am I going to lose? It's a significant calling back to the self. To me, this feels also like, am I looking at life through the lens of fear, or am I looking at life through the lens of love? And looking at life through the lens of love is the understanding that I am guided, supported, protected in any direction that my life goes, instead of being absolutely consumed by fear, thinking that life is simply happening to me. I find this Mercury retrograde absolutely fascinating, and I don't think it's being spoken about enough, which is a shame, because when we have Chiron so close to any astrological event, we are talking about the healing of a soul wound. We are talking about the healing of a soul wound of a collective of people that have forgotten that they are the leaders of their own selves. And that's a big deal. Okay, so now let's move on. What is the ruler of Aries doing? So the ruler of Aries is Mars. Mars is currently in Pisces in conjunction to Saturn. For those of you who have followed my work for a few years, if you've worked with me personally, you know that I don't like to label astrological aspects are good or bad. Yes, traditional astrology, there are, planets in detriment, exaltation, all of the things. I believe that astrology is a study that evolves with time, because it's not meant to be a stagnant study. It's meant to reflect what's happening in the collective. And I say that because Mars in Pisces especially for those of you who are into astrology, you might have read, heard, seen Mars in Pisces is in a bad sign. It's an absolute detriment. Look, Mars is an energy that likes to forge ahead, go forward, don't stop me. It's like to me, Mars is the energy of the chariot in the tarot. It's like you almost have to it's an energy that that sometimes needs to be just maneuvered a certain way. It needs a path so that it doesn't just become destructive or erratic. Okay. In Pisces, which is the last sign of the zodiac, it's a water sign. It's not fire energy. We're talking, every time I think of Pisces, I think of being submerged in water. This can feel like, okay, so you're telling me that something new is starting. You're telling me that there's a new part of me that's being born. What does that mean? What do I do with it? Where do I go? And what I want to share with you is that that is actually the appropriate, or what it feels like to me is an appropriate response to the energy that we're experiencing. The reason for that is that I think a lot of times, especially when we look at astrology, I think the way that astrology is interpreted is this is what this means. This is what can potentially happen. And we just expect it to happen. And we want answers and we want hard, concrete facts right now. It's not how it works, because that's not how life works. So Mars in Pisces, and because this energy has 6 to 12 months to unfold, Mars in Pisces to me feels like over the next 6 to 12 months, we are trying to find and figure out our way with this new part of us that is emerging. Mars in Pisces moves a lot slower. So not only do we have Mars, the ruler of this eclipse, in a sign in which it just can't go gung-ho at, it needs to find its path, but we also have a Mercury retrograde at the same time. When we look at the potency of a total solar eclipse in the sign of Aries, that is a lot of forceful energy propelling us forward. If we're just looking at that. But I think that the cosmos are actually being very kind to us by giving us these two other aspects, like a Mercury retrograde, which immediately means a slowing down of energy, and a Mars in Pisces, which is, I don't know my way yet. Because what that's doing is that is keeping us from crashing and burning. The potency of a total solar eclipse in the first sign of the zodiac has the potential for that. And so Mars, when we look at the highest expression of a Mars in Pisces, is what if instead of forging ahead outward, you forge ahead inward? Whenever Mars is together with Saturn, it can feel like frustrating, stagnant energy. It can feel like we are trying to sprint, and Saturn is saying, this isn't a sprint, this is a marathon. And it requires preparation, it requires patience, it requires that we understand truly that the pace at which we want to go in. Saturn in Pisces, to me, adds an immense amount of intentionality, because wherever Saturn is, anywhere, it's asking us to take a moment to assess a situation and to really create a plan forward. But because these two planets are in Pisces and Mercury is retrograde, so cognitive thought is slowing down during a very esoteric time, which is like an eclipse season, this is about going inward. This is about going inward and really begin to create a channel of communication to your intuition, to source, and begin to guide your life from that place. And learning to do that takes time. Learning to do that is learning how to be in stillness and get to know the softness of the voice that exists within you that can then guide you slowly through your life. And that can very much feel like we're trying to run underwater. Have you ever tried to run underwater when you were a kid? You tried to do that and you couldn't because the water is heavy, right? This, to me, feels like a blessing. It's almost like the cosmos are saving ourselves from ourselves. Now, it's important to also talk about the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction that at the time of the eclipse, Jupiter is at 19 degrees Taurus, Uranus is at 21 degrees Taurus. The exact conjunction of these two happens between April 18th and April 20th. To me, they are within an orb of conjunction. A Jupiter-Uranus conjunction is the interruption of a pattern, Uranus, that in the long run, Taurus will help us expand and grow Jupiter. That is probably the simplest way that I can put that conjunction in. But here's the thing. Anytime that Jupiter and Uranus meet, they begin a new 13-year cycle. So over the next 13 years, there are interruptions of patterns that are going to happen throughout your life that are going to shift your perception, that are going to shift the way you do life. Remember, I started this video with talking about the collective. I think that we're going to experience those things much more collectively that then will affect the way that we experience our individual lives. So here's a simple example for this. Ever since 2020, things have never been the same since before 2020, right? Everything changed. Everything changed. The way businesses are ran, the way that people work, the way that people show up in the world, the way people relate to each other, everything has changed. To me, the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in Taurus is the continuation of that. But the difference is that in Taurus, I think that there's a different level of acceptance from the collective, therefore us as individuals. And Taurus is about accepting the simplicity of things in order to move forward in a much more grounded way. I hope that makes sense. What I want to leave you with is to notice how this particular solar eclipse, there is an accumulation of Aquarius energy, Pisces energy, Aries energy, and Taurus energy. There's an accumulation of just these 4 signs out of the entire zodiac. What does that mean? When we're talking about Aquarius, Pluto and Aquarius, we're talking about the collective. When we're talking about Pisces, we're talking about a significant ending, probably in the collective. When we're talking about Aries, we're talking about a rebirth. We're talking about the individual. If there is transformation happening in the collective and something has to end in order for that collective to shift, then as individuals, we will begin to show up differently. And Taurus, what we deem valuable and important will also change. So track your own timeline, see how these messages land. Again, may this be of service. Much love to you all, and I will talk to you next week.